Good morning, everybody. Just waking up. A lot of folks sleeping in, and that's good. That means you're not on the roads or out and about. I know everybody, a lot of folks off school and off of work. And the first thing folks are noticing is the wind this morning, right? Really rattling those windows. And at times, sounds a little scary, right, with those howling winds. But as we take a look, you're waking up. The good news is we now have Tropical Storm Ian, no longer a hurricane. We are getting those tropical storm force gusts, though. Okay, so you see that at Mayport, a 54-mile-per-hour wind gust here, and at times they've gusted to 64. Notice where the reds are. I point that out because most of our highest winds today will be right along the coast, based on the latest track. So coastal St. Johns County, Duval, and Nassau County would see the highest wind gusts, and it still looks like those gusts closer to the 60 to 65-mile-per-hour range. The problem is, these northeast winds will continue throughout the day, so that's why we're concerned about the storm surge, the flooding. And I think most of your storm surge with this system would not be downtown, but closer to the coastal areas based on the latest track overnight. Okay, so maybe a little better news for areas like San Marco for that high tide coming around noon, but not good news for areas like St. Augustine. So we've got team coverage, of course, coming up from St. Augustine with Lou. And I tell you what, Renata out there, and they've gotten a lot of rain and wind this morning. And that's really where the heaviest rain and wind is expected with this system over the next 12 hours before things try to settle down. All right, so if you're in areas like coastal St. John, St. Augustine to Palm Coast, notice we'll still see the northeast wind, the heaviest rain. But notice how the rain, there's a sharp contrast from west to east. Once you get to the river, the west side, back toward Lake City, not as much rain, right? So lighter rain amounts here, and that bodes well for this forecast. That means that storm surge, or the water trying to pile up with that northeast wind, won't be as bad as what we saw during Irma, okay? As we go through today, we'll still see those gusty winds with us, but notice your heaviest rain and wind pivoting offshore with the latest track, okay, of Ian. So good news there. And the back edge of the rain actually could come our way as early as this evening, and we'll start to see some improving conditions, but we still have to watch the tides very closely. Again, 2 high tides to watch, 1 at noon and 1 at midnight. So as we look at the big picture, let's put it all together for you. We are watching the latest track of Ian, a tropical storm with 65-mile-per-hour winds. The next update is about 8 a.m., and it could be where they show the winds not quite as high, okay? We have a northeast movement at 8 miles per hour, pressure at 986 millibars, and as it continues to move north, coming up, we'll talk about this could actually re-intensify and head toward the Carolinas as maybe a hurricane, okay? But again, not for us, heading away as it re-intensifies. That's the key to the forecast. In fact, all the spaghetti models this morning really centered in on about 100 miles or farther east from Jacksonville. So that's good news for us. Big picture also shows once we get through today, improving conditions tomorrow for your Friday, especially during the afternoon, and a beautiful weekend.
Thanks for that, Mike. Nice to hear that Ian is moving away, mainly east from us here on the First Coast. Still, its impacts are being felt and seen. In particular, we're seeing a lot of heavy rain and wind in St. Augustine.
That's right. There we've seen our crews down there. They have seen a sailboat break loose from its moorings and thankfully did not strike the Bridge of Lions. It was able to be secured. But you can see the team all across the area at this point. We are going to go out to St. Augustine. We have Renata DiGregorio there. Now, Renata, we know you said the rain at one point was painful. The way it was, hitting, it kind of stung at that point. What is it like now? Is it continuing kind of that painful rain?
It is not quite hitting me in the same way that it hits your face and then it stings, but I don't want to say that and jinx it because it is still raining pretty hard. It's still really windy. We've got a good example of that for you. If you walk down this way, we are right on St. Francis Street. It's at the corner by St. John Street. And I don't want to get too close, but down in the middle, it was hard for us to see at first because it was dark. It's gone a little bit lighter since then, but there is a power line just hanging through the middle of the road. Really dangerous. It was dark, the power line is dark, and it would be possible for someone to just not see it at all. But this is the first power line down like this that we've seen. When we were over here, again, St. George Street, St. Francis Street. Down this way, we encountered a branch that was right in the middle of the road. We're walking through some pretty big puddles right now. Not sure if you can see the branch, but you can definitely see the debris. There has been plenty of just branches and small pieces of debris from plants around in this area. We haven't found any trees yet. We had to call in and report to the St. John's Emergency Management this power line. Also told them about the tree over there. But the last we saw as well, the sailboat was still tied up there, but still really just going in the wind. And we're gonna go check out after this some of the Davis Shores area. A1A was not flooded when we were over there last because of the low tide. Again, that could change. When we heard from the emergency management officials, they were talking about how tomorrow with the high tide is really what they're worried about. So we're gonna check over there as well, but stay with us. For now, I'm Renata DiGregorio, live in St. Augustine, First Coast News on your side.
Hey Renata, thank you. Continuing our coverage now here in St. Augustine from Renata, kind of downtown, more central St. Augustine. We're here along the Avenida Menendez and the Intracoastal Waterway. Just a sailboat check-in. How about that? Because we were talking about the sailboat that had pounded up against the seawall, broken out of its moorings. Well, just here in the last half hour, we actually watched the mast of that sailboat come crashing down onto the boat itself. So the mast now broken off and actually secured to the boat, and we saw a couple of officers and deputies with St. Johns County and St. Augustine Police come and secure that boat even more so. So now it had been, the bow had been secured. Now the stern, which was slamming up against the wall, is secured as well, in as much as it can be. Not to say that this boat won't sustain any more damage, but at least it's not tracking towards the Bridge of Lions right now. Heavy driving rain, but I think the important thing to have the eyes and the ears on for right now from Avenida Menendez is going to be the flooding, because we last night at the previous high tide, we've got about 1.5 to 2 feet standing here in the middle of the road, and it's a watch and wait for our next high tide. But right now, despite the waves that have been coming over the seawall pretty persistently and consistently, that seawall, by the sheer tyranny of will, preventing any more flooding at this point, even though our tide has shifted from the outgoing now to an incoming tide towards that lunch hour. So we'll continue to watch that flooding for sure, and any damage that may be impending in businesses right here along Avenida Menendez, but most of them boarded up and sandbagged up as well. From St. Augustine, we're not going anywhere. We'll be right here in the street watching it for you. I'm Lewis Turner, First Coast News on your side. Now back inside to you.
Thank you very much, Lou, and definitely good luck out there. You know, it looks like you do have another rain band, in fact, coming through into the St. Augustine area. Just the next few minutes, you can see that line right there, but also just down towards Daytona Beach. Looking at that, the remnants of the outer eye wall starting to approach that. I point this out. I know it's not quite towards our area, but that is working its way towards the north. So that, combined with the increasing tide as we go ahead through the rest of this morning to about noontime, we're really going to be bringing that risk of rising coastal levels from the Palm Coast up towards St. Augustine. Look at the bigger picture, though. I want to show you this. That dry air just infiltrating this. Dew points into Valdosta are into the 30s to the 40s. That's the type of dry air you see in the middle of January with our high pressures coming in from Canada. So that's just infiltrating this storm. It is tearing the western half of this apart, but to compensate, the Gulf Stream, warm waters just offshore, that's picking up moisture, and that's what's driving in here to St. Augustine. Plus, we still have that tight pressure gradient. That tight pressure gradient equals winds. Mayport has gusts of 54, 41 there into St. Augustine. Palm Coast is at 43. Pretty much everybody is seeing tropical storm strength winds, regardless, wind gust that is, regardless if you're under that rainfall or not. But look at this, what's left of the eye out there towards the Space Coast, almost calm right there. But right there's Daytona Beach, where you did have that outer eye wall, or what's left of it, I should say, pushing through. All right, here's the track. This is at 5 a.m. We got a new update coming up at 8 a.m., but the big thing that changed was, if you're just waking up now, this is a tropical storm. It's still edging towards the east. We're still getting our impacts, but hopefully by tonight, right around 2 a.m., we'll get to that dry side of this. We're going to break down what impacts are going to be for the rest of the day, county by county, for you, coming up in just a bit.
Continuing to watch those roadways for you, a reminder that the Sidney Lanier Bridge in Brunswick will close at 9 a.m. due to the winds in the area, and it will need to be inspected before it is reopened. So not sure how long that will be closed, but be aware of that, those of you towards Glenn County. Around Jacksonville and St. Johns County, bridges do remain open at this point. That could change throughout the day. It depends on wind speeds. 40-mile-per-hour sustained winds is the threshold that has to be met for a bridge to be closed. That being said, Buckman Bridge, a travel advisory was issued for those of you crossing the Buckman. It is open, but officials are urging you to use caution because of the high winds.
Good morning and welcome back to Good Morning Jacksonville. Here are 3 things you need to know. Hurricane Ian has been downgraded to a tropical storm, and the phone bank is now open here. If you want to make a call and make a donation for those who've been impacted, the number is 904-632-1200. And we'll hear from Governor Ron DeSantis and other state leaders on Ian updates at 8:45 a.m. But now let's check in with Katie Jeffries and the UF Health Traffic Center. How's it looking out there, Katie?
It is a bad day to be out there on the roadways. Really, if you can stay home today, please do that. That's just my word of advice at this point. If you can stay home, please do that. So this is a look here towards the Buckman Bridge. You can see people are using the Buckman Bridge at this point, but there is a travel advisory for people going across the Buckman Bridge. They are asking that people use a lot of caution because of the winds. It's open, but again, they're saying there's a travel advisory in place for the Buckman Bridge at this point because of the winds. Wanted to let those of you in the Brunswick area know that the Sidney Lanier is set to be closed at 9 a.m. because of the forecasted winds in that area. Before it can reopen, it will have to be inspected. So that, of course, is going to take time. You can still use I-95. You kind of go past, I believe that's the Turtle River, over to US 25, and you can still use that to get into Brunswick. So it's a little bit longer of a route, but you can still get into and out of the Brunswick area. Around Jacksonville and in the St. Johns County area, bridges do remain open at this point. That could change throughout the day depending on the wind speeds, but for right now, the bridges are open. So the big things here, please stay home and off the roads. If you see standing water, do not drive through it. And if for some reason you do have to drive, hydroplaning, major risk today, so slow it down and be careful.
All right, let's take a look at that satellite imagery. We're going to continue to track this storm system as it moves off towards the north. Now, here's one thing I want to point out. This is water vapor imagery. Here's all that moisture getting picked up of the Gulf Stream and sweeping around. But look at the west side of this, that dry air. It is starting to penetrate the back side of this, and this is what we're hoping is going to continue to happen throughout the day. That dry air wraps into this and continues to weaken. Plus, this storm system is going to want to move towards that moisture. The tropical systems are finicky like that. They actually like to go to areas that would strengthen them instead of towards the dry air. That is helping this just edge that much further east, which means away from the first coast, and great news for us. But we're still got the impacts. We still got those rain bands out ahead of that coming on shore. And not only the rain bands, but that basically long fetch area that's pushing up towards our coastal areas where we still have a storm surge warning in place, 3 feet along the St. John. Some spots could see as much as 4 feet. Big issue is that combined with the tides. So by this afternoon, 12:25, Main Street Bridge right around 1 p.m. Talking about the Buckman around 4:25, St. Mary's 1:25, St. Augustine just afternoon around 1:25 p.m. That's when we're going to have that tide coming in. We got those winds kicking up. We have the what's left of the outer eye wall of this storm. What's left of it? It's not really an eye, but that's going to start to move towards the north and really push that water on shore. But here's a look at the main points. Highest risk of flooding with those high tides through 7 a.m. Friday. Rainfall could still be about 4 to 8 inches. Now, most of that rain really, guys, I want to stress, this is for St. John's and Flagler County. Water level rise still could be about 4 feet above normal with those winds about 40 to 65 miles per hour. All right, here's another look at those rain totals. Most of this down towards the Palm Coast, Daytona. Jacksonville still could see about 2 to 4 more inches like I mentioned, but I'll point this out. Look at Georgia, Lake City, even Gainesville for that matter. Not much precip in your forecast. All right, here's Duval. Main points here for county by county. Heavy rain today, storm surge up about 4 feet, 2 to 4 additional inches of precipitation. St. John's and Flagler. All eyes are on you out here today. I know we keep on coming back to you, but really this is where the weather is. 4 to 8 additional inches of precipitation. Coastal water level rise about 4 feet. We already seen some coastal flooding this morning with this. Once again, right around noontime. But once you go inland, watch this. The rain totals back off. 1 to 3 in Glen, Camden, Nassau. Look at Columbia, Baker, Bradford. Less than an inch of precipitation.
Thank you so much, Robert. We are continuing our team coverage here of Tropical Storm Ian this morning.
Let's head out to the beaches area where we find on your sides Matthew Torres. We've been finding him at several areas of the beach throughout the morning. Neptune, Atlantic, and Jacksonville Beach, which are all closed, by the way, today. He has a look at the conditions out there right now. Interesting, Matthew, I did see that there were actually people who booked hotel rooms in Jacksonville Beach just to see Ian. That's crazy to me.
It is crazy, and even some hotel employees are shocked by this, that people are choosing to actually want to be in this area. We're just here at the 4 Points Hotel here at Jacksonville Beach, and as Katie mentioned, if you don't have to be out on the roads, don't, because it has been consistently gusty, if you can't tell, just by hearing it, but of course by the trees, and we actually just had to kind of change my footing here just to make sure I can keep standing with how strong the winds are. Again, here at 4 Points, it's been so strong, in fact, that staff actually had to put cinder blocks there in the front door to keep the wind from whipping the doors. I'm told that's been a consistent problem all morning long, to the point that even wind and rain were going inside the lobby. So now they're taking the extra efforts to put the cinder block there. And one of the employees, as I mentioned earlier, she said she is shocked that people actually wanted to book a hotel room here during this week, knowing Ian was coming, therefore they can experience it. However, those, as we've been reporting all morning long, beaches are closed today because of Ian. So really, if anything, they might just be able to go outside and experience the wind. But if you don't have to be outdoors or out driving out on roads, of course, don't, with how gusty things have been.
the sun has just come up out there in the area, but have you had any chance to actually go look and see how the dunes are holding up in the area out there in the beach?
Hey, not yet. That's actually our next stop from here. But of course, as you know, dunes are certainly a huge priority for the communities here along the beaches. So that's something we're about to check out, as well as the pier, since of course the pier just reopened a few months ago after years of reconstruction. So far we're inching our way closer there, but getting pushed back by the winds.
Thanks for that, Matthew. We appreciate it. Now we want to check in with meteorologist Robert Speta. And Robert, we've got to talk about this because we're hearing some good things, seeing some good signs in terms of Ian and its track. It's now moving east. But still, we do have to warn people, even though this is now a tropical storm, we're still talking about some serious winds. And we all know what happens in certain parts of town when it floods here.
And this is a really good point. And I keep on pointing out storms weakening as far as that rainfall, but the wind forecast still is spot on. We're continuing. We're seeing gusts. Just saw a gust at Marineland, upwards of 70 miles per hour officially out there, out towards parts of Mayport, Huguenot. We're still seeing those gusts 60, 65 miles per hour right at the mouth of the St. Johns. So the wind is there. Estimated sustained still at 65 miles per hour. That's down towards Daytona. But as you mentioned, yeah, there's the good news. Look at the model consensus. It's coming offshore. That's going to bring in the dry air quicker on the backside of it. We're still getting that tight pressure gradient, and we're still getting that leading edge of the moisture. So tropical storm warnings remain in place, especially for all of our coastal counties, as well as that hurricane watch still for the immediate coast. That is in place, but keep in mind, that's more of a precaution because this storm is still going to be strong enough, not quite to hurricane intensity, but the National Hurricane Center does like to give it a little bit of a leeway. So we're not expecting this to re-intensify and hit us with hurricane strength winds off the coast. Tropical storm conditions are our main threat. Tropical storms still can produce a storm surge, 2 to 4 feet possibly here along our coastal areas. But look at this. Mayport, as I mentioned, yeah, look at the wind gusts. 65 miles per hour. Look at the beach right there. That's what 60, 65 mile per hour winds look like. So it's a rough morning for our coastal areas.
Thanks for that, Robert. We appreciate it. And now we want to head to San Marco, another area that, as we mentioned, seriously floods during even just regular rain. But a tropical storm, there's a lot that we can expect there. And, a lot of people are still on edge in the San Marco area following Irma. We saw people lose everything during that time.
Yeah, they're understandably on edge. I mean, some people are still trying to kind of rebuild and put the pieces back together from Irma. And now you have Ian. So Destiny McKeever is in that area checking in on San Marcos. So what are you seeing flooding wise?
Well, the sun has come up, so I can see a lot better now. And I will tell you, no flooding just yet. But of course, you have the river right behind me. And then you have homes behind my photographer. So just about 10 feet away from there. And that's the concern here. We, during Irma, as you mentioned, saw people riding around in this area via boat just because they could not travel via foot. So we are talking to some residents out here, and Thomas actually came out just to kind of see and check on the water, see if it had come over yet. And he says that, he's from this area. He's been here, I would imagine, for other storms.
Many.
Yeah, many storms. And I'm going to take off my mic for a moment just so we can hear him. Tell us about your experience with Irma.
Well, when Irma was here, it was about probably knee-deep in water right about where we are now. And I could barely get down here. I just rode my bicycle down here, so I didn't drive. But it was pretty bad.
Wow.
This is nothing compared to that.
Yeah. Were you nervous when you heard that Ian was headed our way?
Very much so. I boarded up my house already today. Yesterday.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. And when I saw you, you kind of just sat there for a minute and you got out and you were looking. Talk to us about that. Are you going to come and check every so often?
About every 6 hours I'll come down here, ride through the neighborhood because I enjoy doing that. So
okay.
Just make sure everybody's okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Thomas, we're going to keep checking on you. Thank you for talking to us. We want to toss it back to you all in the studio, but as you can see, wind picking up, but no flooding in this area.
Good.
Not quite yet, but again, we know what happens in San Marco. Now behind you, Destiny, let's talk about the water and the levels. What are you seeing behind you? Is it rising pretty much, the St. Johns behind you?
Not yet. So let's walk over there.
Yeah.
Let's walk over to the water. It's not rising just yet. I think during high tide is when we can expect the levels to pick up just a little bit. But this is our first time really being able to see the ground. It was still dark out here earlier. And we don't really have any water near the homes just yet. So that is good news for this area. People are starting to wake up. They're checking to see, how it's looking. And we can tell you so far in San Marco, the water hasn't risen, so no flooding on the streets.
And Destiny, now that you can actually be able to see much better, now that the sun is up, are you seeing any down trees, any down power lines? We have seen that in other parts of the First Coast. Are you seeing that in San Marco as well?
Yes, so Katie, I know that you guys saw that video from earlier when we were over on Lenox Avenue. There was a tree in the road and it was blocking the road, and we had crews to come and clean that up pretty quickly. But that is just about the extent of what we've seen as far as trees in this area, specifically San Marco. We haven't seen any down trees or anything like that. We're looking around now. I can see, just a few branches, if anything, but nothing too major where crews are having to head out into this area. But of course, we're going to ride around a little bit more. As you said, the sun has come up. We can see a lot better now. We're going to ride around and see if there are any significant damage to report.
All right, so far so good. Destiny McKeever there in the San Marco area. Thanks for that, Destiny. We want to check in now with meteorologist Robert Speta. Robert, what are you seeing in terms of San Marco and the wind gusts out there? We can hear it, how loud it is and how it's really whipping. We saw what was going on with those palm trees as well.
You can really hear it, and this is the case across actually the entire First Coast. Of course, San Marco and along those coastal areas, that's when the winds pick up. But just up or down river, I should say, from San Marco, had a wind gust just reported at Annis Jacks at 40 miles per hour, over towards Mayport at 54. But pretty much the entire First Coast is seeing near or over tropical storm gusts. This is the next thing we're waiting for, though, is high tide across our area. Of course, we're going to continue to track that coming up in just a bit.
just stay off the roads and hunker down.
All eyes on Ian, the historic storm now making its presence felt on the First Coast.
From the beaches to the airport, closures are stacking up. Both locally and across the state. Rescue efforts are ongoing overnight and into the morning hours.
We are on your side, riding the storm out with you. You're watching Good Morning Jacksonville's extended coverage of Ian.
We want to welcome you in on this Thursday morning, September 29th, as we continue to track Ian, now a tropical storm here along our First Coast, and some really disturbing news just into our newsroom concerning a death that has resulted from this storm. We're talking about a 72-year-old man out in Volusia County.
Right. Reports are that he went outside to drain his pool. His wife called 911 after he disappeared, and his body sadly was found in a canal just down the hill from his home. So the first fatality now connected to Ian at this point. We'll continue to follow this, and again, that's out of Volusia County. We also have some new video coming into our newsroom that we're going to show you here. This is some video. It looks like a group of young people inflating a life raft next to the Matanzas River in St. Augustine. Now, you can see as they're trying to do this just how much the wind is whipping around. And again, not advised. Please do not go into the water at this point. Please stay away from the water.
We are seeing power outages in several portions of our First Coast, St. Johns County, Clay County, Columbia as well. Thousands of people without power at this hour. Now in St. Augustine, look at this video of a power line just dangling in the middle of two buildings in the downtown area of the ancient city.
And just one street over, a tree limb broke off, fell into the middle of the road, a pretty big tree limb. And the truck on the left side of your screen just inches away from being severely damaged by that limb, which, Keith, as we've been saying, one of the things to worry about if you're going to be driving around. You've got tree limbs falling down, power lines, so there are dangers out there.
It's a dangerous situation, folks. We are on your side with live team coverage on every angle of Ian's impact across the First Coast this morning. First, though, we want to check in with meteorologist Mike Prangley because we want to take a look at this track. Mike, we're hearing some good news in terms of Ian's track heading towards the east away from us still. This is a very dangerous storm. We're talking about a tropical storm, and we know what could happen here when it comes to flooding.
Thank you, Keitha. Yes, and let's take a look at what Ian is doing right now. Now, it's moving off to the northeast at 8. The first critical thing is it's now Tropical Storm Ian. Okay, so we're going to get an 8 a.m. update. Stay with us in about 20 minutes or so from the National Hurricane Center. We'll have the new data and likely will decrease those sustained winds of 65 miles per hour. In fact, as we take a look at the latest spaghetti models, all the different consensus models, they continue to track Ian off to the east of us. So the eastward trend has been our friend. And that is some wonderful news. But for us, still a very rough day with the wind and the water. And let's officially take a look at that track here. And you can see the very latest, about 100 miles to the south-southeast of St. Augustine, getting ready to pivot offshore. And you can see the heaviest bands of rain right now near Volusia County. That's where most of the wind is. And then the track actually moving about 80 to 100 miles east of Jacksonville. Okay, that's a little farther east from last night, which is good news. But unfortunately for our friends in the Carolinas here, it does look like it could re-intensify and move up as a hurricane or a strong tropical storm. So re-intensifying and checking on our friends in the Carolinas. But all of that intensification should happen well east and northeast of our area. So optimistic is the word I'm using, but boy, we still have to keep our guard up. There's those models, the spaghetti models, really clustering now well to the east of Jacksonville. Here's radar. We're talking about the heaviest rain, and this will be the theme throughout today into this evening. Okay, the heaviest rain will be mainly St. Johns County, Putnam, and Flagler County like we're seeing right now. And then you move offshore, and this is where we're going to see most of the heaviest rain. So that's even the better news, right? As we look at the big picture, you can see the center of the storm about 110 miles from St. Augustine. And as we zoom in, got to be one of the reasons we don't want to be out and about today, right? Just some blinding rain. Lou Turner verifying that earlier. We also had Renata out there, and she's watching things carefully as those waters are high, and now you've got the heavy rain on top of that, putting down about a ½ inch per hour. But you go just to the north, and it's the dry air that's winning out, right? We've got lighter showers up toward most of Duval, Nassau, and southeast Georgia. Our friends in Jekyll Island, Camden, and Glenn County, just more of a light rain this morning, but it's more about the wind. We've had some wind gusts of a good 50 to 60 miles per hour, especially along the coastal areas, and that theme will continue today. Notice we got those gusty winds. We head toward 11:30 a.m. And the big question is, will we get one of these big bands that come in and coincide with the high tide? So that's what we're keeping an eye on, okay, right now. But right now it looks like the highest tides and some of that surge we've been talking about all week, the best chance and the highest chance of that risk, unfortunately, would be not downtown like we've seen with past storms, but more toward the coastline and especially St. Augustine, where we got a couple of crews watching out for you and your family down there. So as we put this into motion, we get toward 4 o'clock this afternoon, and you can see the center of our storm already well east of us and getting ready to move by. So hopefully this will continue to scoot well to our east as we head into this evening. And once that happens, we'll start to see the back edge of the rain move east with some improving conditions. We still have some gusty winds, though, it looks like, through the overnight hours. Notice we've got some wind gusts of 35 to 40 miles per hour here. So as we look at the good news on this, it's that the tracks have been a little farther to the southeast. The heavy widespread rain is not happening at this point, nor is it expected. In fact, rainfall totals across the area have been lowered, and that'll help keep those surge totals and the rise in the tides lower. We take a look at that northeast wind now of 54 in Mayport, gusting to 46 in St. Augustine. Again, the highest winds along the coast. And as we look at the latest visible to the precipitable water, all right, so we have the precipitable water, the X-ray, so to speak, in the atmosphere. Here's all the dry air wrapping in. The big thing you get out of this is the heaviest rain and the highest totals of rain stay offshore to our east, along with the highest winds. Overall today, we'll continue to watch our big three, and that's the high tides at noon, okay? As we look at downtown, that's coming in at 12 p.m. We also have the high tide at St. Augustine right around early afternoon. So we'll keep you updated on the high tide where we could start to see that storm surge and more flooding on the way. But for now, just staying put, staying home, and here to keep you safe.
Mike, it's interesting you said there's no widespread rain right now, and it's always interesting to me to see. Some people walk outside right now and see nothing really, just a little bit of drizzle. They're like, what's happening? Not a hurricane. And then you head to St. Augustine, you see the heavy winds and rain. It just depends on where you are at a particular time.
Yeah, especially with this storm, Keitha. You can see the heaviest rain with this storm likely would be staying from St. Augustine south to Palm Coast and Daytona Beach.
And Mike, I know you mentioned, some of the worst of it is going to pass east of us, but don't want people to get too complacent or think that, it's going to pass us.
Right.
Like, we are going to see effects of this.
Right. Big effects. And when you're seeing 40 to 65 mile per hour winds for 12 or more hours, in fact, things won't settle down with the wind probably until after midnight tonight. That's basically like having a severe thunderstorm with all that wind where we give severe thunderstorm warnings for a reason. You shouldn't be outside in those 60 mile per hour winds. And we're going to see those all the way in through late tonight. And then the two high tides we're watching out for early afternoon and toward midnight with that surge and that water rise of at least 3 to 4 feet. So that's why it's important to stay put, stay tuned, and hopefully everybody can just relax together and spend some quality time with the family.